Thank you for joining us for the Wild Ones Native Garden Design Series. My name is Loris Damerow, and I will be your host. I've been a member of Wild Ones since 2011, and I currently serve as the National Vice President. This evening, I'm honored to take part in a discussion with Ann Autrey, creator of our Columbia River Basin Native Garden Design. For those of you who are new to Wild Ones, we are a membership organization devoted to promoting the use of native plants to create sustainable landscapes. We carry out our mission through educational programs and provide resources such as the Wild Ones Journal, Native Garden Designs, Seeds for Education grants, and other educational webinars. At the local level, Wild Ones chapters deliver area programs, and that includes garden tours, speakers, conferences, seed exchanges, and native plant sales. Wild Ones has 75 chapters and 27 new seedling chapters in 29 states across the country. And if you're not a Wild Ones member, we hope you join us and take advantage of the camaraderie and support that comes with being part of a local chapter. Our important mission needs you. Wild Ones chapters are where members put mission into action. We get our hands dirty and we learn by doing. Right now, chapters are actively recruiting officers and volunteers to plan next year's programming. These activities require time and talents of many different people, and your voice can amplify the native plant movement by sharing your skills and enthusiasm with your area chapter. Tonight, we have a webinar featuring the native garden design for the Pacific Northwest Columbia River Basin. This area of the country has a new chapter. The Columbia Basin Seedling Chapter just launched in August of 2022. Reach out to the founders, Katie and Ryan, to learn more about how you can get involved. What if there isn't a chapter near you? Well, now's the time to consider starting a Wild Ones seedling group in your area. Chapter founders across the country connect and collaborate with one another for mutual support and guidance. If you're eager to advance the mission and cultivate support for native plants in your area, visit the Start a Chapter page on the Wild Ones website. Wild Ones inspires and empowers people and communities across the country to transform area landscapes into vibrant and essential habitats for all forms of life. Programs like this would not be possible without the generous support from our members, donors, and folks like you who attend Wild Ones programs. Please consider donating to Wild Ones. The link can be found on our website at wildones.org. The Wild Ones Native Garden Design Series demonstrates that native plants can be beautiful, beneficial, and achievable for gardeners of all skill sets and on all landscaping budgets. This program contains information on how to build your native garden and begins with the identification of your ecoregion. Selecting the right plants for your landscape and determining right plant placement is important. Aspects to consider will be identifying your specific climate conditions and finding local native plant nurseries in your area. The program also features a growing number of free, downloadable native garden designs created by professional landscape designers and representing a variety of ecoregions across the US. A plant list accompanies each design and provides a quick preview of the diversity, the beauty, the native plants, and it gives instructions on a phased installation approach. All of this can be easily downloaded and printed at home. These designs are assembled using native plants that provide food and shelter for wildlife, creating a rich, colorful habitat throughout the season. And we hope that these resources inspire and encourage and motivate you on your native garden journey. We are honored to have designer Ann Autrey with us today to share her creative insights on her approach to preparing the site, selecting plants, and designing home landscapes in the Columbia River Basin. Her passion to create landscapes for wildlife, for pollinators, and for humans has given her the opportunity to design over 200 native plant gardens. Ann Autrey owns and operates Tapteel Native Plants, a native plant nursery in West Richland, Washington. She lives on a small farm with her husband, and together they care for horses, goats, sheep, chickens, dogs, and honeybees. One activity she enjoys is horseback riding in the shrub steppe environment around her home. And this activity combines her love of horses and native plants. Ann, thank you for joining us and sharing your talent and expertise with all of us at Wild Ones.
Thank you, Loris. And hello, everyone. I hope everybody's doing well, and thanks for tuning in to my presentation. I want to give a big thanks to the Wild Ones organization for giving me this amazing opportunity to create a design for this wonderful organization. I discovered Wild Ones website during the COVID lockdown and found the designer webinars to be so enlightening, and I felt like I found my compadres in terms of understanding the importance of planting native plants in our local ecosystems and embracing the ideas of planting in communities that where plants naturally belong together, and not just placing in a native plant here or there in your conventional garden, but actually embracing the idea of native plant community. And so for that, that was very comforting to me, because that's what I was naturally feeling, but didn't see that happening around me in landscaping around this area. So thank you for Wild Ones for stepping outside that conventional landscaping box.
Well, thank you, Ann. Thank you for that acknowledgement.
Yeah.
And as we begin, for those of us who are less familiar with the Columbia River Basin, could you share a bit about the area's typical weather and climate conditions, and maybe tell us a little bit more about the seasons and the temperature and weather patterns that you experience there?
Sure. And first off, I think there's probably a few people out there that assume that Washington State is covered in conifers and mountains and streams and and has lots and lots of rain. But the fact is that the eastern part of the state is very, very dry. And the Cascades form a block across the state and keep those rain clouds from mostly moving into the eastern portion of the state. I live in the southeast portion of Washington, in the Tri-Cities area, and here our annual rainfall averages about just over 7 inches a year, and so that's much more different than the west part of the state, which sees over 30 inches of rain and snow every year. Nearly 60% of our precipitation falls in the months of November to March. And then we get 40% split between spring and fall. And our summers are going from, let's say, June through August are very dry. And maybe we get an inch of rain during those 3 months. And so we have very dry and very hot summers. Our summers, the average summer temperature in that same range from June to August, rain is about 75 degrees. And so that's day and nighttime temperatures. So it stays very warm. And lately, and it is experiencing warmer and warmer weather. The winter temperatures, the average temperature stays just above freezing, around 33 to 34 degrees. We get some snow. Generally, December and January are our snowiest months, with about 5 inches, averaging about 5 inches in each month. But that's about it. We also, and this is somewhat important because we are further north, in December, we will have generally less or equal to 9 hours of daylight. So it is dark, and we see the sun. The sun usually sets between 3 and 4 p.m. Towards the end of December. Our spring season starts in March with possibly occasional snowstorm, but our average frost date is April 13th. And then our last frost date would be around October 15th to the 18th, somewhere in there, right around now, or when we're recording. We have a very long growing season, generally from March through October. And that is probably the longest in the state in terms of being able to get that vegetable garden in and having, all that time for harvesting in the fall.
Well, and that's very different than many parts of North America in terms of climate conditions. And what would you say, what are some of the important factors of gardening with native plants in your region? What factors are important to consider as you are building a garden for that garden to thrive?
Yeah, so there's several factors. I mean, that's a really great question, Loris. There's several factors that are different than the conventional landscaping wisdom. And we spend a lot of time here at the nursery trying to re-educate people in how to plant in the native plant garden. And probably the most important factor is the fact that we do all of our planting in the fall. We try and time the planting of the native plants right before our moisture cycle begins in November. And so late October through November is fine to plant. The plants don't care. And you're timing it with that natural moisture cycle. But during that time, when the plants have been planted, their roots are growing in the ground and they're going straight down. So there's not much lateral action. It is a straight down kind of growth. And they use that moisture from that winter cycle to grow, to use for growth. And the roots follow the water through the soil column as it goes down vertically into the groundwater. So that is one of the biggest re-education points that we have to make with people, because of course when spring comes in March and April, people want to plant, and so you have to, if they're looking to create a truly native, drought tolerant landscape that maybe doesn't use irrigation once established, then they need to hold off and plan their garden and plant in the fall. Mm-hmm. We can plant some of the more riparian zone plants in the spring, but of course those would be supported with irrigation to help them make it through the summer. So planting in the spring, if you were to do that, the truly native plants or our hyperlocal plants don't stand a chance to survive, because they don't have the time to get their roots set into the ground and to get prepared for the hot temperatures that start generally now in the middle to the end of June, and I'm talking about 100 degrees. and that drought also begins. So we start, we won't have any more rain. We have extremely hot temperatures, and the plants barely recover from transplant shock before they're hit with that scenario, with that weather. And so it's just very tough for them to survive, and usually they don't.
Yes,
So
it sounds like a very challenging condition. And as we've been experiencing across the US, those conditions are changing. And I wondered what changes you've noticed in your region over the last maybe 10 to 12 years.
Well, the changes have really been remarkable. I moved here, or my husband and I moved here in 1987, about 35, almost 35 years ago. And we used to experience summers where basically you could be out every day, and you could, it would get into the 90s. Every once in a while, we would have temperatures in the hundreds, but in the summertime, but then things would really cool off in the night, and the temperature would drop 40 degrees, 30, 40 degrees. But now it's different, and it's kind of scary how fast it's changed. When I was looking through kind of the weather data that spans from 1945 to the present, it was remarkable how prior to 1985, there was a few high temperatures recorded, in March, but after 1985, that number, we had, I think, 7 in the first 40 years, and now in the second 40 years, it doubled the number of those high temperatures. So, and then in the last 8 years, from 2014 on, the number of those high temperatures are just clustered in this last 8 years. And so in 2021 was our, or 2015 was our warmest average temperature of 57.5 degrees. That's over the whole year. Last year was our second warmest temperature, 2021, at 56.7. And now 2022 is looking to either equal or just be in that top 3 somewhere, because as we speak, we're still experiencing a fall of 70 to 80 degrees days, and normally we would be getting much cooler temperatures at this time. We also have had, and this is really interesting, in 2021 we experienced 74 days that are equal or over 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and 35 days equal or over 100 degrees. This set the new record. We have 15 days over 100, and they're sporadically mixed. But in 2021, all of July we reached over 100 degrees. And on June 28th in 2021, we reached our all-time high temperature, but completely in the record books, are all since 1945, of 118 degrees.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, it was crazy. And now, but 2022 is matching that. Right now, we are this year we've had 65 days over 90 degrees and 30 days equal or over 100 degrees. So we are this summer in 2022, we are just right behind the record-breaking 2021 summer. So it is, and then our annual precipitation has declined over the last 8 years. And, normally we get just over 7 inches of rain. In 2020 and 2021, we had less than 4 inches of rain the whole year. So it is, you can imagine what that's done to our, the areas out in the shrub steppe where it's, hasn't been developed yet. And it's really been, and our groundwater levels are lowering. And there is quite a noticeable change in terms of what we are used to. And one last point, and this is kind of important with our climate, is that our wind speeds have been increasing over the last 8 years. So now we usually have an average wind speed of 7.7 miles per hour, and now we're up to an average wind speed of 8.8 miles per hour. So what's the big deal there? Well, the wind affects the evaporation rates, and so we have a very arid, dry atmosphere, and so the evaporation from the soil is going to be increased, and that means less water for the soil column where those roots are, where they're planted, and so they have less water to access during these drought periods. So
Well, it sounds to me with these changes afoot where weather is becoming more extreme, you really have to know the plants that are going to be able to accommodate this. And so let's jump into talking about the plants that are best suited for these drought conditions. Can you talk
okay.
a little bit about that? Yes, the plants that will work here.
Yeah. So we actually, people might look out in the shrub steppe and think, oh, there's just sagebrush and cheatgrass, or and they don't really understand, or they don't see all the different the variety of plant life we have there. And it's really until you walk out and you start noticing, oh, there's these little daisies, or there's these bunch grasses, or these, and it's just amazing variety of plants actually. So for in our region right here in Southeast Washington, our hyperlocal plants need less than 10 inches or even less than 6 inches of water to thrive, which is just amazing if you think about it. We have, and we can look at the standard big sagebrush, but there are also smaller shrubs that are very usable in a landscape kind of garden. So we have the gray rabbit brush and the low green rabbit brush. We have purple sage. We have the buckwheats. We have fringe sagebrush, which is part of the sagebrush family, but it stays very low and it makes a really beautiful border. It's probably the softest plant you'll ever touch. We can use some of the larger shrubs like antelope bitterbrush or big sagebrush. And there's other ones like winterfat or four-winged saltbrush. Those are all kind of medium-sized, spiny hop sage that all do well in a garden setting. We also have, and so being shrub steppe, that steppe portion of the ecosystem are the bunch grasses. So we have a variety of bunch grasses like Great Basin wild rye, needle and thread, Indian rice grass, blue bunch wheatgrass, sandbird bluegrass are all ones to choose from. And it's just amazing thinking about the Great Basin wild rye. It is the tallest bunch grass. It can reach at maturity, 6-7 feet tall. And think about it, it's getting less than 6 inches of precipitation a year, and it can reach that height. It's really quite amazing. And in the plan, I use it as a windbreak and a screen in the front yard on either side because it just does so well in that kind of situation. We also have wildflowers, lots and lots of wildflowers to choose from. Some of the more common ones are Monroe's globe mallow, sand penstemon, blue mountain prairie clover, silky lupin, all of those wildflowers. do very well with very low amounts of water.
Great, great. Well, you obviously know the plants that are suited for the growing conditions there. There's a lot of factors that go into designing a garden. Can you explain your approach to or your methodology for developing a design?
Sure, sure. When a homeowner or client contacts me to help them design a garden, I ask to come to the home site to visit, and in that visit, it's usually about an hour, we talk about the homeowner goals, what they're envisioning, what they want to see the garden do for them or do in their yard, the goals for that. We also look at where they want the garden, the site. We look at what needs to be prepared. Does there need to be, lawn removed? Are there invasive weeds that need to be removed, and how best to prepare the sites for the native plants. And then we talk about and I evaluate where the garden's going to be, what direction it's facing. Is there shade? Is it full sun? Is there access to water? Do they want to use irrigation water or do they not? And we talk about, what kinds of things they notice in the garden or in that area that I may need to know about their soil. Also, we talk about, what's the natural pathway? Do you want a path from your front door to your gate and so we talk about how they use the property, and so that I can make sure to incorporate that in my plan. We also discuss plants and what they like, what they have seen. I ask them to send me photos of things that they see if they're out in the shrub stuff that they like, so I can incorporate into their plan and make sure that everyone understands that this is their garden and not mine. And I'm trying to create the garden that they will enjoy. And so I want to know all of those things about them. What are their favorite colors? What things do they not like? Are they allergic to sagebrush or other plants? So let me know those things so that we can get the right plants into their garden. And then finally, after I meet with the homeowner, I create a plant list and send that to them. And then they have the ability to edit and look over the plant list before I go ahead and do the design. And often there's small changes that need to be made, or they want something added that I didn't have. And so I can do that then. And then I go ahead, once I have that meets their approval, I go ahead and design the garden, and taking into all the factors that I've learned after meeting them and seeing the site. And I design the garden to place the plants where they will thrive the best. And so matching the right plant with the right place.
Great. Sounds like you take a lot of factors into consideration and really work with the homeowner to create a vision that's going to work for everyone, including the plants and the homeowner. What are some of the focal point, or what is a focal point, an example of a focal point that you might include in a design? Or what are some of the particularly colorful blooms or that you might include in a project?
Right. So in terms of, like, say, this project in the front yard, I used a couple of things as a focal point. First, the antelope bitterbrush is a large shrub step plant, and it will provide, and it's in the very center in the front yard, just across from the front door. And I use that as a focal point, and then place colorful and interesting colorful blooms or colorful wildflowers and interesting grass around it, so that it will create a spot where your eye is going to go to. And so, and then around the front door, I've used some of the more colorful, texturally different plants that will catch your eye in some way. So for instance, Monroe's Globe Mallow, which is a beautiful coral color flower and blooms pretty consistently from fall or from spring to fall, is in there. And the foliage is kind of that gray, sagey kind of color. And then near it, I have it flanked with blanket flower, which I think most people are pretty aware of. And then and those are also a long-term bloom, or several blooms through the season. And then another one is Lewis's blue flax, and it's just such a gorgeous plant in terms of, it actually is a wildflower that has the structure of a bunch grass, kind of a vase shaped, but the flowers are at the ends of these beautiful stems that move in the wind and have lots of movement, and it's very light, flowy kind of wildflower, and so it picks up in there too, and so I use that one quite a bit. And so those are some of the focal points in the front yard. In the backyard, I centered it around the patio area where people would, where the homeowner and guests would be maybe eating or having drinks out on the patio or the deck. And then 2 bird baths help to kind of center that. And around those bird baths, I have lupin, big leaf lupin, which is such a showy, beautiful, lush plant. I have, again, Lewis's blue flax in there for the movement and the willow, or the lightness of it. Also, goldenrod is in there to help frame around that bird bath, just to give that pop of that bright yellow color, especially in the late summer, fall. And so, and then against the shrub line, I have the tall bunch grasses. I have the blue bunch wheatgrass, and around the deck is little blue stem, which of course is so gorgeous, especially now in the fall, as it turns to a reddish color from being that blue-green color in the spring and summer. And so in each corner of the backyard, I have red twig dogwood, which is very eye-catching in spring and summer, and then fall and winter, when it drops its leaves, those beautiful red stems are there. And if it's snow, you get a light snow or snow, those red stems against that beautiful, the white snow is just gorgeous, and really is very, it's really nice to look at.
Very striking. Yes.
Yeah. So,
you have been talking about the aesthetic and visual aspects of the. Does your design support and preserve the plant life? How does it support the wildlife species that are native to your area?
Oh, okay. So most of the all of the plants that I have listed and shown on the plan can support native wildlife in terms of food supply, like nectar, pollen, berries, or it can be a host plant for larvae to feed, or it can be a shelter for protection from the sun, wind, rain, or predators. And so wildlife like birds and small mammals enjoy the fruit produced by the chokecherry and the berries from shrubs like golden currant, mock orange, serviceberry, snowberry, and red twig dogwood, antelope bitterbrush, kinnikinnick, Oregon grape, and creeping Oregon grape. The bunch grasses, like blue bunch wheatgrass, Great Basin wild rye, prairie June grass, little bluestem, and Indian ricegrass all help to provide seed and add to that food menu for the wildlife.
Great. In addition to that, Anne, what plants, we all know that milkweed supports monarch butterflies, for instance. What other plants do you utilize particularly for pollinators?
Yeah, well, we have in the plan, I have used native yarrow plant, which is our most common wildflower here, and it's a white yarrow. And it is amazing how many pollinators and insects use that flower. Just this summer, I was observing yarrow flower in our yard, and on that one flower, I mean, and they're fairly large. I noticed there was a native bees, wasps, beetle, ant, and butterflies, all feeding on that one flower. That cluster of flowers there. And it's just amazing the variety that it can support. Also, lupins are huge for supporting our great larval hosts and support a large amount of insects. Daisies in the plan, we have a couple of different daisies. They attract many pollinators, and buckwheats are especially important for providing as a food source for pollinators. One of the buckwheat, snow buckwheat, is the last flowering wildflower in our area, and it does a beautiful white bloom. And when you see it blooming, it looks like there's a light dusting of snow on the ground from a distance. And so that one gives that last bit of food for the pollinators before winter time, before everything goes completely dormant. One of the most interesting, charming supporters, or one of the best flowers for supporting native pollinators, is Monroe's globe mallow. And it has been so fun to watch. We have a native pollinator in this area. It's called the globe mallow bee, and it actually will fly into the flower itself, which is fairly small, and curl up on its side around the center of the flower and take a nap. And so that has just been a joy to watch. And my grandson likes to call them the napping bees. So we go looking for napping bees in the globe mallow.
Well, while we're on the topic of wildlife, how do the native plants that you utilize, how do they support wildlife that's impacted by wildfires, for instance?
Yeah, so in our area, I guess we've talked about having not just 4 seasons, but actually 5, where wildfires have created now a 5th season in the summer, where we are in this area, we're in a basin. And so we get socked in with smoke. And so it becomes, you can't go outside because it's so harmful to your health. But as those wildfires have burned the shrub steppe, they have taken away the ecosystem. For instance, sagebrush, when burned, doesn't come back. It doesn't, no matter when it's burned, it never comes back. And so those are large shrubs, and they take years to reach maturity. They grow very slowly. And so you lose, and that's a keystone species to our ecosystem. So you lose this very important anchor for the shrub steppe. So what happens to the wildlife once the fires hit? Well, they're displaced, just like people are when their homes are burned. And so they have to go somewhere. So by planting native gardens, especially ones that mimic the shrub steppe or have those plants in your yard, give that wildlife a place to go and to feed and to
Is
find
it
a shelter.
difficult to find native plants in your area?
Well, if you search out the native plant nurseries, and there's a few very good nurseries in our state, you can find these plants. If you're going to a conventional garden center or a big box nursery, you're probably not going to find the xeric or the low water plants. You'll be able to find perhaps red twig dogwood, mock orange, Orton grape, the more riparian shrubs. And if you do find, for instance, blanket flower, you're going to find it in the many varietals. And so we want to, make sure people understand that if you are choosing varietals, you are choosing a plant that possibly could have lower value to wildlife. And so to stay in the natives if you want to increase the wildlife value of your landscape.
Great, thank you. Well, back to the design aspect of planting natives. Sometimes Wild Ones members, those who've planted a native landscape, they worry about how it appears to their neighbors. And the plants and patterns that you've chosen seem to be more uniform and maybe a little bit more formal than a typical meadow style native landscape. Can you talk about your choice in doing that?
Sure. There was really two factors to that, reasons why I did that. First, if you go hiking out in the shrub steppe, you aren't going to see a meadow or a prairie like you might in the Midwest or Great Plains or in the East. And so the plants are actually, you'll see more clusters of groups of plants close together and then space in between. You may see a clump of bunch grasses, but then around the sagebrush, you're going to have 3, 4, 5 plants all clustered around that sagebrush. And in between is space. And so it is kind of a formal setting out in the shrub steppe. We don't have the compost or the organic matter in the soil. So what forms on top of the soil is this biocryptic crust, and it helps to. It's a mixture of cryptobiotic soil crust, and it's a mixture of living organisms, algae, lichens, mosses, the cyanobacteria, and fungi, all forming together into a really hard mat that you can actually walk on. I mean, but of course, with traffic, it falls apart, and that's really what's happened in most disturbed areas. But when you do have these spaces, and that cryptobiotic crust prevents from invasive weed seeds to take hold in the soil because it's this really hard mat on top of the soil. And so you don't have you have this empty space. Now, what's happened, we're in disturbed areas in the shrub steppe, is that crust is gone. It's been disintegrated by traffic, by livestock. And so now you have bare soil, you have the sand there. And so what happens? You get an influx of weed seeds like cheatgrass or tumbleweed, and they take over those spaces. Now, when a wildfire starts, it used to be in a pristine area, it would jump from plant to, it couldn't make that jump from plant to plant cluster. And now with that cheatgrass, it just has fuel to go all over and cover everything. And so we naturally have this space in between plants. Now, and so what I realized is that a lot of people, especially in our area, are nervous about making this transition from the standard lawn landscaping to a native kind of landscaping. And so if the landscaping that I designed for them mimics kind of a uniform pattern that maybe they can be a little bit more comfortable with. I was just talking with a homeowner a week ago, and she's talking about how taking out her lawn and how her neighbors are going to see her as the crazy one. And I was like, no, 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 no. You're the sane one. They're the crazy ones. And so, people have that, are nervous about it. And so, so creating something that's a little more simpler, that isn't so overwhelmingly um, uh, different than what they're kind of used to is easier. Also, to fill an area with native plants can be costly, and so kind of being we're inching into that system, into that new ecosystem. And if they don't have to buy hundreds of plants, they're more likely to go ahead and do that. And one thing I count on with these plantings, especially like in the front yard, is that these plants can reseed, and they'll start seeing these new clusters forming. They'll see some buckwheats, germinating, and there's some bunch grasses right next to it. And so you can, over time, allow that area to fill in naturally through reseeding. Or the homeowner every fall can come and buy some more plants to place in some of those empty areas if that's what they would like to do. So it leaves a lot of options open for the homeowner and gives them choices. And I think that's important.
You talk about reseeding from that the plants would do, an established colony, for instance, would do naturally. Is planting from seed realistic for the homeowner to apply seed to an area rather than plugs or plants, mature plants?
Yeah, and oftentimes, depending upon the area, seed is recommended.
Okay.
But one thing that people have to realize is that the seed needs most of our native plants need to be seeded right now in the fall. And again, with that winter moisture cycle, that's when those seeds get the water to germinate in the early spring. Also, many of the native seeds here need special treatment to initiate that germination process. They need either scarification, which means the surface of the seed needs to be roughed up so that the embryo can receive the water, can get into and start developing that embryo, and germination starts. And also another process that needs to occur is called stratification, where the seed is subjected to periods of low temperature, and then low temperature and moist conditions. Now, back 40 years ago, our winters met those conditions quite well, and we would have our natural, average moisture cycle, and then we would have our good low temperatures for a good stretch of time, maybe a month or 2 months. And but now we can't always count on that. And many of our later, our recent winters have been drought winters. And so so that seed that gets placed down maybe goes dry during a crucial time in the germination process when it still needed more moisture. It was counting on more moisture, and then that embryo dies. And so it's really crucial that that we have our average winter in terms of moisture, and also the cold for a lot of those seeds to initiate the germination process. And so it is a kind of a tough combination to get all at once now. But one good thing about native seeds is that they do last. They do stay viable for many years in the soil, and often will germinate when they do finally get that winter, and it may be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe, and even some 10 years down, they will all of a sudden take advantage of the conditions that have been presented by Mother Nature. So,
Well, another one of those conditions, of course, is moisture. And your design recommends installing a drip irrigation system. Is that common in your area for people to do that?
yes. Well, getting less than, six, or getting around 6, 7 inches of water a year, you have to have something to support the landscaping that's been put in place. And for the most part, home builders are putting in lawns, and they have large trees, maple trees, and things like that. And so those all need lots of water. So where do we get that water from? We can't count on it like thunderstorms or anything like that during the summer. And so we have irrigation, and people put in irrigation systems in their yard to water their plants. And so most commonly, irrigation systems are sprinklers, which spray the water over the whole area. And so that covers even open areas. So that lends to a lot of germination of weed seeds that might blow in or be come from birds or whatever. And so by using drip irrigation, it is the most efficient use of water, and it delivers the water right to the plant and right to the root zones. And so you're not spraying water over a whole front yard. You're actually targeting each plant that needs the water. And what's really nice about it is that the emitters that you place to the plant can be there's a variety of different sizes. So if this plant needs 10 inches of water, and the plant next to it needs 6, you can target each plant for the correct amount of water. And so it's not everybody gets showered, they all get that water. And one other thing that really is great about drip irrigation in our area is that many of our native plants really don't like having their leaves showered with water. They prefer to have the water right to the root zone, and then the water to flow through the soil column, leaving the roots not sitting in water but dry. So we want fast draining soil, and so you can do that with drip irrigation. And I strongly recommend to people that they run their systems maybe once or twice a week, but each zone gets maybe an hour of watering at a time, rather than what many people have their systems set up for 20 minutes every day. Each zone gets 20 minutes. Well, I'm a strong believer in developing those long roots, and this can benefit trees and shrubs and even turf, in that you do fewer watering times, but longer watering periods per every time you water.
Right.
I hope that makes sense.
Yes. And of course, those native plants tend to have deeper, more penetrating roots than generally plants that
Right.
you buy in a commercial setting or a box store setting.
Yeah, and you're trying to develop that long root growth, and that benefits every plant to have longer roots in a climate like ours,
Mhm.
and especially in drought times. It's better to have those longer roots than shallow roots. Exactly.
Now, there's a lot of factors that go into creating a sustainable, working, beautiful native landscape. What if you don't have the resources to install this design all at once? How would you break this down into phases? How would you go about doing that?
Yeah, so generally when I'm going over the installation of the garden, it's first about site preparation. And so first the homeowner needs to needs to figure out and take care of the preparation of the garden in terms of maybe sod removal, removing native or invasive weeds, removing any plant that they is not going to be in the plan, and taking care of getting all of that removed, plus putting down some sort of hardscape. Now, that biotic crust that I was talking about before can take years to develop. So you can't, that's not really an option. So what we suggest using is our basalt mulches. So rock mulch that is comes in variety of sizes, colors. It all depends what quarry it's mined out of. And so you can mimic deserty kind of colors and have it can be quite, I mean, the rock can be quite complex in terms of the colors that it shows. And so there's, and you can go select what you would like. Excuse me. Also, so they need to get the site prepared. One thing that I didn't mention was that, when you buy these native plants, they tend to be pretty small. They're a year or 2 years old. The plant themselves can be very tiny, but the root system is very long. And so it's very difficult to plant the plants and then put the hardscape on, because you run the risk of crushing the little plant. And so really the site preparation has to come first, and then the planting comes last. So in terms of planting in phases, we always recommend you can generally start with the bunch grasses. They are very easily adaptable, usually very successful. Also the shrubs, getting the shrubs in and getting them growing in their spots is also a nice way to just ease into your plan. So getting the borders or the outline, like in backyard, you would do the shrub line against the fence back there, maybe do the Great Basin wild rye and the antelope bitterbrush and some of the other shrubs the first phase after preparing the site. And then as each fall comes, adding in those wildflowers, the smaller shrubs, maybe some of the smaller grasses to fill in those areas around the shrubs and the tall bunch grasses. Also, you can use annual plants. They usually reseed really nicely. And so even though they just last one season, you're going to see them popping up in different spots that you didn't think that they would the following year. It's always a great surprise to see where the seeds go.
So it's okay to break it down into smaller sections, and knowing that it's going to take a while, maybe even years, to develop the different layers of a living landscape, such as you designed for here.
Yeah. Very, it's a work in progress, and it's actually really, I always view the native gardens as an evolving garden, and it's always something different every year, and it's always just a very pleasant surprise, kind of like Christmas when you see something germinating, and it's like, wait a second, you're not, just the typical weed. You're something, that's come in. To this year, I had a showy milkweed show up in a garden that's very dry, and I'm just like, how did you do that? You need a lot of water. So it made me think that maybe there was an underground water source in that garden that I didn't know about. So, anyways.
Yes, the landscape it's full of surprises, and it's a wonderful dance. It's a wonderful relationship as you invest in it, and it gives back, and you respond back and forth as to what comes next and what's going to show up. It's wonderful. Yeah. Well, Ann, this is a fantastic plan, and this has been a wonderful introduction to gardening in an arid environment with a lot of requirements. And one really has to pay attention to what you're doing because there's just a lot of factors involved. So you've given us some great foundations to proceed and to learn the beauty about the native plants of this quite amazing region.
Yeah. I'm excuse me, I really appreciate the opportunity you've given me. And it's just been a lot of fun, Loris. I really, it's just a real honor to do this. So.
Well, great. Well, we have all your materials. Ann's Columbia River Basin design, the plant list, the designer notes, and the list of regional nurseries can all be found on the Wild Ones website at nativegardendesigns.wildones.org. So thank you, Ann. And for our viewers, if you have enjoyed this webinar or have comments to share, we ask that you please complete the short survey following the program because your feedback is important to us. And Ann, thank you for sharing your expertise and walking us through your world of native garden design. So thank you.
Thank you, Loris.